Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast. I'm your host, Shaquille Barmel. I'm the CEO of Ocean Blue Strategic and partner with the Summit Group. I'm a coach, consultant, and speaker, and I help leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals make an impact through improved performance. In this podcast, I share insights and interviews with interesting leaders to define practical lessons that you can use to make an impact in the face of uncertainty. We are proud to be brought to you by the Summit Group. We help companies increase revenue and deepen customer relationships by moving from sales excellence to authentic business relevance through engaging learning experiences. Embarking on a path of self-disruption takes courage and deep self-reflection. For Lucas Chang, founder of Y2 Entrepreneurship Labs, that reflection took him back to his time as an adolescent playing street hockey with his buddies. What he has done with that memory and his years of business education and experience is remarkable. His company designs and delivers learning experiences for high school students, and sometimes younger than that, to immerse them in problem-based learning and design thinking. Listen into this conversation and discover how the impact he is having may spark some incredible innovations in the future while creating a generation of collaborative, creative, and communicative leaders. Enjoy the conversation. Hey, Lucas, how's it going?
It's going well. Got my Grogu t-shirt going on.
Yeah, that's a very cool t-shirt. I got to find out where to get that.
Yeah, well, I'll send you the link. I saw that. I'm like, yeah, no, that's perfect. That's good. I have a little Grogu in my house, and this was perfect.
I don't know if all my listeners would know Grogu, but it's a character in the new Star Wars TV series. What's the name of that TV series?
The Mandalorian.
The Mandalorian.
Yeah, and so just as a plug, it's one of these TV shows that sounds like you got to be a Star Wars geek to enjoy it, but it really is a Western where you get this lone character who finds this little baby, formerly known as Baby Yoda, and just the adventures they go through. But it's one of these things you're like, Baby Yoda makes everything better, and Mandalorian is a legit good show. And for any of you who are thinking about checking it out, the last episode in season 2 features a cameo, which is amazing. Blows your mind level of amazing.
Yeah, it's true. Well, don't give away too much, but
no.
It was pretty cool.
I'm not going to say what who this cameo is, but it was good stuff.
Yeah, awesome show. I loved it. So, Lucas, I've been waiting for this conversation for a long time because we go way back, not to childhood, but we were hanging around the same neighborhoods as kids, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it goes back a few years in our career. We lost touch for a bit. We've been working together recently, and there's lots of great fun to talk about in that story. But I've been looking forward to this because in our day-to-day work, we haven't had a chance for this kind of conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I mean, and we used to have these kinds of conversations even when we first met, were initially working together. We would have the opportunity to have these chats over like lunch or whatever.
Absolutely, right. So really quickly to catch people up, there's lots of details to the story, but we'll give them the synopsis. We first met when I was working at Purolator. I was seconded onto a project to lead a scoping for improving our customer responsiveness through our call centers, our sales engagement, basically a CRM project. But you came in as my consultant from Accenture. I didn't choose you. You were given to me as my partner from Accenture to work with on this scoping exercise. And we hit it off pretty quickly because I remember right away, we connected on the idea that, look, this isn't a technology project. This is an organizational, cultural transformation project enabled by technology. And we connected on that right away.
Yeah. Well, and I think it was about people.
Yeah.
Organizations about people. And I mean, you kind of look at the stuff we've done since, and I think we're still in the business of helping people be the best versions of themselves. And I think that's where we had the connection back at Purolator.
Absolutely. So we got to work on that project, which is fantastic. I rolled off that project and went on to do something else at Purolator, and you probably went on to another client at Accenture. But we stayed in touch, and we both had young kids at the time, but we would sneak out after the kids went to bed, and every so often we'd probably, I think once a month, we'd meet for a drink in the evening and compare notes and tell stories. I don't know. I can't even remember how long that went on, but I moved away to Vancouver and our contact was kind of more distant and far between until relatively recently. So catch me up around what, in your mind, what were the big events in your life between when we worked together at, maybe after we stopped having drinks together in the days after the Pure Later project? What happened for you?
Well, I'd say one thing that's funny is back in the day, there was no Zoom. There was Skype, but I don't think that was as culturally top of mind as it is now, which is why we didn't continue our conversations that we would have at the Firkin virtually.
Yeah.
So I think now we have this more socially acceptable method of video conferencing. So since then, so after Accenture, my older daughter was born. And right around that time, Accenture was saying, we've got these great opportunities for you in the States, which would have sounded amazing to me 5-10 years earlier, but I really wanted to see my daughter.
Yeah.
Made a choice that I would prioritize her. And right around that time, TELUS had an opportunity to do something in the automated telephone space. So that was kind of where I cut my teeth at Accenture, specifically within CRM. So I went to TELUS, led a couple of teams there. And then in 2012-ish, I started thinking, the time at TELUS was great, but there were just so many things I started thinking, I think I'm not meant to, the things I want to accomplish with my life are not necessarily going to be best accomplished at TELUS, which isn't to take away from the organization. It's just different focus, different priorities. So 2013, I left and didn't know what I wanted to do, which has kind of been my story. So after undergrad, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I did an MBA. After MBA, didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went into consulting. So after TELUS, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I went back to consulting, did that for a little while, but I got involved in 2014 with I'd say the innovation and startup ecosystem in York Region, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Greater Toronto Area, it's the area immediately north of Toronto, which includes municipalities such as Markham, Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Newmarket, and so forth. So I did a lot of work to help build the community, kind of coordinated a community of entrepreneurs ranging from early ideation, pre-startup to having run a business for 15 years. And we went from, the community was kind of zero because there wasn't this umbrella. And then I'd say now, before pandemic, we were probably at about 600 people who were part of the conversation, receiving newsletters, a portion showing up for the events that we were doing. And then on Twitter, we went from 0 to 2,200 followers or something.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been interesting to see that and see the maturity of the ecosystem over the last 5 years. Because it really has changed. And what's been cool is in kind of coming out from that, within that ecosystem, there was a need that I saw.
Well, can I interrupt you there for a second? Because I want to live in that world of how you landed in that place. And this conversation is going to be quite intertwining and a little bit meandering. And I really want to dive into what happened next, because that's where our paths cross again. But I want to live in a second for that moment when you didn't know what to do following TELUS, and you fell into this ecosystem working with the York region. In retrospect, it's kind of just a quick kind of thing. I fell into the ecosystem. But what was happening for you in the time where how did you fall into that? What was the thing that made you fall into that?
So at the point I left TELUS, I'd been working in big corporate for 15 years. So I had the Accenture name, I had the TELUS name. I had the almost the pre-constructed, communities within each. Within those environments, things like salary and title and team and whatever almost shaped the interactions that I would have within that society, the mini society of TELUS or Accenture. What I was curious about when I left was I won't have any of that. I've got no title. I could walk around and say my title is X and people would say, I don't care. I don't know what that means. So I was really curious to see how I would interact with the outside world without all the things I took for granted. And I think there was an open mind that I had of, okay, well, I think I'm going to do a small business thing, and I'm going to go with the journey. So one of the first things I saw was when I started my consulting practice, it was hard to know where to begin to meet people and talk to people and network and get the word out. So my story involved, I first joined the Markham Board of Trade because that just seemed like a logical place to begin. But as I was going through this journey of myself learning about what was available to people starting businesses and entrepreneurs, I started seeing certain things that were missing. And so one of the things was there was not really a place I saw, for example, where entrepreneurs of whatever stage could connect with other entrepreneurs without having to pay the membership fee to the board, which is not to take away anything from the board. But there wasn't kind of that Liberty Village place where you could just kind of meet people, right? Have these collisions that you might have at Quantum, at King and Spadina in downtown Toronto. And so what I thought was it would be interesting to try to create something like that in the York Region area. So people had an option of not having to go to downtown Toronto for networking events. They had the option of staying up in York Region, but in a kind of a non-salesy, non-pitchy environment.
Right.
So I started doing that, and kind of word got out. And so certain people would, so that it was under the umbrella of Startup York that I did that.
Okay. Yeah.
And kind of over time, I think people who were looking for something similar, that they didn't want to drive, as context, to drive from York, from the south end of York region to downtown Toronto on an average day back in 2014, 2015, around dinner time was probably 40 minutes each way. So there was a commitment there to drive down, versus if you live in Richmond Hill and there's an event taking place at the Highway 404 and 16th Avenue, that might be a 15-minute drive.
So you saw obviously the entrepreneurial ecosystem. You saw it starting to thrive and flourish through these kind of co-working spaces where entrepreneurs, startup people got together. And you said, is there an opportunity to create something? Is there a pain point for some of those people that don't want to travel all the way into downtown, heavy traffic in Toronto? Can we do something like that regionally? And that was kind of the first impetus. You saw a pain point. And the reason I'm drilling on this is because, we'll talk a little bit later about some of the things we're doing now, but you saw a pain point and you saw a group of people, let's call them a persona.
I was wondering if you're going to go there.
So they called them a persona that had this pain point, and you decided to solve for that problem for those people. Am I interpreting right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and that's amazing.
And it was interesting. I mean, the process of validating whether or not, if I was that persona, in validating that other people felt that, I went, okay, so I'm going beyond myself now. And yes, there's a real problem affecting real, entrepreneurs who are here, and what they want, what's missing for them is something local and something that's not pitchy, and et cetera, et cetera. So very much what you said.
Yeah.
Identifying a real need.
Okay, so I'm going to put a pin in this story now. We're going to come back to this point and we'll connect some more dots. But before we do, I want to go backwards a little bit. We discovered while we were working together in Toronto that we grew up in the same neighborhoods and hung around in Burnaby, British Columbia. I was more in the South Burnaby side. You were in the North Burnaby side. Our schools, Burnaby Central, and you were at Burnaby North, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Burnaby North. So tell me about growing up in Burnaby, and what was it like for you? And are there any experiences from being a kid that you've kind of carried with you into your adulthood, into your leadership, into your business practice?
Yeah. So growing up in Burnaby, it's a life that I knew. It was a comfortable place. School was good. I was always probably a little bit of an outsider. Never really quite felt like I fit in, but I'm going to guess that every single person, or most people who are listening, felt that at some point in their youth. But something about me that I think is continued to now, I always, for some reason, always kind of gravitated towards the underdog. The person who may not have a voice, the person who's still finding their voice. So a story I'll tell you real quick. When I was 12 years old, my buddies and I would be playing road hockey. And, there was Canadian tradition. You play hockey, and everyone knows back in the day when you heard the word car, it was you take the net out of the way, the car goes by. So we eventually got tired of that. And remember one day I looked at, there was probably 10 of us who were playing, and I thought, well, instead of playing on the road, which if the road was a bit busier, it might be dangerous. I thought, well, it'd be interesting to see if we could go play in the school gym. So I went to the principal and I asked, okay, all my friends were like, oh, no, they're going to say no. He's going to say no. He's going to say no. And I thought, well, the worst is that he's going to say no. So I went in and I said, here's what's going on. We're playing with cars, but if no one's using the gym from 3:30 to 5 on a Friday, could we play? And we promise we'll keep it clean. We'll leave it the way we found it, and so on. Could we do that? And he kind of was like, okay, yeah, you hear a couple stipulations, but sure, we trust you. And it was kind of that me looking at, well, we were all 12, 13 at the time. I thought the rest of the group may not think instinctively to go ask for this. And I think since then, that's been kind of me looking at, okay, well, these people, they're underdogs. They're not necessarily going to get opportunity. Let's try to create it for them.
So the idea that you were playing road hockey and their kids you're playing road hockey with, there was inconvenience. There was, again, a pain point, cars, interruptions all the time. And you thought of an idea of representing them and yourself, because you were part of that group, but representing yourselves and trying to make things better to reduce the pain and do all that. And that seed was planted for you think at that time about finding ways to represent people that aren't necessarily going to represent themselves.
Represent. And then that evolved into helping them learn to represent themselves. But it very much was, because I remember thinking, part of the conversation with my friends at the time was the phrase, but we're just kids.
Right.
Came up, quite a bit. The principal's not going to listen because we're just kids. And I thought, well, you know what, let's test that.
Wow.
But it was kind of that same thing. So now, as we kind of think to some of the stuff that you and I've been doing, we'll look at the grade 7s and grade 8s in Kingston and go, what could we do to ignite them?
Yeah.
To give them their ability to represent themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's dive in there. So I want to do a little bit of storytelling. You and I kind of went on living separate lives, but aware of each other on social media. I saw you were doing some really cool things, working with young people and teaching entrepreneurship and those kinds of things. And I didn't know exactly what you were doing, but I thought it was cool. I didn't know how you're making money though. I wasn't sure if you were doing okay because I wasn't sure if you could make a living doing stuff with young people in schools. But then watching you do that, again, it was on LinkedIn. I was just reminded of how much joy I had when I was early in my career and I was doing some things with junior achievement, teaching high school kids and all of that stuff. And I thought, wow, that's really cool that you get to do that. I didn't realize at the time what was going on in my head and what the parallels were with what you were doing. But then pandemic hits and I decided to kind of reach out to some people and you were thinking the same thing. So we connected with each other. But then around the same time, I was participating in a virtual conference, an Ignite conference for entrepreneurship and professionals. And I attended because I was speaking at the conference. I got to attend another thing virtually. And it was a gentleman by the name of Salim Ismail talking about innovation and entrepreneurship. And we went to the Q&A section and I was thinking about a little bit about you, a little bit about junior achievement, and a little bit about what I was doing in my own work. And I asked him the question, what do you think about introducing innovation and kind of problem solving skills to high school students? And he came back again, all virtually, saw my comment in chat and got excited about it and said, absolutely, huge interest in this. This is something we all got to do. And then the next day or days after, you and I had a conversation.
Yep.
And everything kind of connected because that's essentially what you were doing. And I was ready to hear it because the path of the thought. So now tell me about how you landed from ecosystem entrepreneurship and what you're doing with high school kids or with kids, not just high school young people.
Yeah. So I was involved in the startup ecosystem, active in York region, did some stuff in Toronto as well. So I had a bit of a sense of what was happening for people who were interested in fintech and health tech and whatnot. And there was training that was being delivered. So things around helping them founders go through ideation, creating a business model, building their pitch. So things that were happening in the startup ecosystem I thought were great. But I also observed that with students who are supposed to be we say the future leaders and the change makers. Well, the limitation with them as I went through what was available in the ecosystem, both in Toronto, York region and around, was large for the most part. Even if there were a lot of really good resources for grown-ups, adults looking to start businesses, those same resources weren't necessarily available to students. You may have the odd student who's a very concrete business idea. He or she will figure that out. But for the average teen who is thinking, I'm curious about entrepreneurship, but I don't have a solid idea, there wasn't some place that they could go to get exposure, not read a book or watch a video, but get exposure to entrepreneurs who have been through it, to get mentoring, to bounce ideas, to be in a safe place where they could learn about it without having to bring a concrete idea. So I started a conference that essentially brought together what was being taught to startup founders, but package it up to be focused on teenagers, grades 9 to 12. So I did that once a year, twice a year, and there was good uptake. And what was interesting was at first, there were business students who showed up. They would see entrepreneurship and boom, business.
So this is university business students?
These are high school.
Oh, high school
students who kind of went, I'm interested in business. So whether they had done JA or junior achievement, or they were part of DECA.
Yeah, right.
The first conference or two drew those kids. But as we went on and I changed the terminology to be more around innovation and solving problems. And then we started seeing health and wellness kids and arts and culture kids and sports kids and engineers on top of the business kids. And so there was something there I thought, okay, well, this is, interesting data point. So innovation, problem solving can be for all sectors. And there was a number of students who were non-business that after the conference, they'd said, wow, we came and we thought, entrepreneurship, we associated that with business. But now that I've been through it, it's making me realize that for my sector, my area of focus, life sci, I can apply techniques around innovation and problem solving to solve real problems in the life sci sector. I hadn't thought about that. So that was an interesting data point. And then the second interesting data point was students were asking for the conference throughout the year. And at the time, the conference was 100% supported by sponsorship. So whatever sponsorships we got went 100% to covering the cost of the student experience.
Yeah.
So during the conferences, I made no money. None of the money went to me. It was entirely side of desk, give it to the kids. But as there was more demand for this kind of programming, I started thinking, well, how could I start working with kids during the year? And the idea of bringing together a program that would take place in schools came up.
Oh, okay. Okay. But before we go into that, can we pause? You ran this program for lots of young people from all different walks of life. Any favorite stories stand out for one of the participants in these conferences that went on to do something interesting that you
Yeah,
feel proud of?
there are a lot of them that I'm proud of, and I'm still in touch with a bunch of them. But one person I'll pick on, her name is Lynn Chen.
Yeah.
So Lynn came to the April 2016 conference, and she went there because she was supporting a friend.
Yeah.
Buddy of hers was there. She wanted to go and be there. But while she was there, she's like, yeah, sure. All right, I'll participate. Why not?
Yeah.
So she joined and she formed a team. And her idea, the problem she wanted to solve was around waste management. Specifically, that she observed when people would go to the CNE or on a main street of a touristy area, they would get ice cream, for example.
Yeah.
They would eat their ice cream and throw the spoon away, wasting spoons.
Yeah.
So her team's solution was to come up with candy spoons.
Ah.
So they worked through the idea. They did a 3D mold. They researched recipes.
Wow.
And they brought candy spoon prototypes to the final pitch to give to the judges.
Yeah.
So they were one of the top 2 teams that the judges recognized. They went on to start a business. And so for a few years, Lynn and her team ran Candy Cutlery. And then eventually that was kind of a chapter of her life that was done. So she closed that with her partners and she went to Queens and did some, study there for a bit. But then she's recently started another business called Layer CI, which is a platform that allows developers to accelerate their testing of their software programs.
Wow.
And she did this she met her co-founder from New York. And at this point, they're revenue positive, they're raising funds, and they are part of Y Combinator in Silicon Valley.
Amazing.
And she didn't her journey really is special for a variety of reasons. One, yes, she started this journey, even which she would say from Y2, but she really within York region was helped by a lot of organizations within the region, ranging from Seneca College. She was part of Venture Lab, which is one of the regional innovation centers in Ontario. Yeah. She did some stuff with York. She's worked with York region. So she has had a lot of touch points. Yeah. But I think the thing that is most impressive about her is that Lynn, I think, would say that when she was younger, she was, victim of bullying. She had some reason to maybe doubt herself, and to see her rise from that kind of place of uncertainty to suddenly being in a celebrated place and doing some really cool stuff, to a little bit of imposter syndrome, to now she's in a mental state where she is not just doing well with Layer CI and dealing with the everydays of running a business, but she's now in a place of giving back.
Wow. Amazing.
So it's really been, to see her confidence rise. And she has her bad days, but it's just inspiring how resilient she's been.
So that's 2016, and she was a high school student.
Yep.
Between 2016 and 2021, she has started a business, then wrapped up the business, gone to university, left university, started another business, kind of like a tech platform.
Yep.
Getting funding in New York, part of now these innovation labs and entrepreneurship support services like Y Combinator, which is like really hard to get into, Silicon Valley startup incubator. And in the span of 4 years, what does it feel like, Lucas? I know you're a humble guy, but just for a moment, humor me. What does it feel like to be part of that journey?
To be part of the narrative is amazing. And it's so much a testament to Lynn and kind of what she's accomplished. And obviously Y2 and Lucas are not the main players. And if anything, Y2 would be from a past chapter in her life. To know that that we've had some impact to help her be, the person she is today. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. And I mean, as a coach, right? Like you go and you work with these CEOs and you work with executives, and that ultimately they make the decisions and they live and die by the consequences. Yeah. But as a coach, if you can help them just reframe something and because they've reframed it, find success from that, you're like, that was your decision. You made the call on the court. But I feel good that I offered you something to kind of tweak it to make you go, make that decision on the court. Yeah.
So that was that whole period was the founding of Y2 Entrepreneurship Labs.
Exactly.
With a focus on young people.
Yep, exactly.
So so now you were starting to talk about how you went from that to actually programs in school. So walk me through that kind of.
Yeah, I think so. Y2 for short was very conference based from 2015 until 2017.
Right.
In 2017, I started thinking, well, there's this request that's coming in, a little bit here, a little bit there, but the questions are coming in. Hey, do you have something for classrooms? And I thought, okay, that'd be interesting. So I took a look at all the things that I had been teaching startups, from forming a problem statement to building a persona to coming up with ideas to building a business model, prototype, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, well, what if I put into a structure, a problem-based learning structure?
Yeah.
And it was a set program and brought it into schools. How would that look? And so I did that. I piloted it with I was talking to one of my older daughter's teacher at the time, and he was looking for something interesting. I was like, well, I've got this thing. I've never done it before, but would you mind if I guinea pigged it on your class? And he was, I just work out the kinks, and I want to see whether, do some initial
Yeah.
validation.
Yeah.
The biggest stakeholder, the loudest voice to me were my daughter's friends. So if I went in with a bunch of grade sevens and did this thing, and after I left and they went to the outside for lunch afterwards, and if they were like to my daughter, wow, what is wrong with that guy? That would be right. Like, these are the people I'm trying to serve, or these kids.
Yeah. User
But
feedback.
exactly. The teacher might be political in the sense of being diplomatic. If it was terrible, the kids would be ruthless. And my daughter would be ruthless back to me. So I was really interested to see how that went. And then some of the comments that she told me that her friend said was like, hey, your dad's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, so there's something there. So it was kind of, I went through the past and kind of got some insight into the program. And then I started talking to other schools about it. And there were a couple schools who were very early on thinking about how do we train our kids to think about entrepreneurship and how to focus on the problem, not necessarily on the test score.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's one school in Toronto that I talked to, and so I showed them the program. They thought, oh my God, this is the kind of stuff we want, and you've already developed it for us. Would you like to teach our classes? So that was the first foray into teaching. In that case, I was teaching 4 classes of grade 8s at this school. And at the same time, we looked at the value of the program, and I could say, well, here's the price.
Yeah.
And the school went, that's reasonable, and we think we believe in this, so let's do it. And that was the beginning of offering the Y2 PBL, or problem-based learning, into schools that you have experience teaching as well now.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's a great story, because I actually didn't know the whole kind of journey and how it all evolved. So around the time that you're doing this, I'm working in an organization, nonprofit space, and one of the things I'm very interested in learning about is design thinking. And so I reached out to one of our supporters who works in a large Canadian bank, who heads up digital at that Canadian bank. And I sent him a note saying, I want to learn about design thinking. Give me the fastest way to do that. He sends me a book recommendation called The Sprint. And I devoured the book, and it taught me a methodology. And then I tried the methodology with my team. And I wanted to hire somebody to help run a session in my organization. So I called up some people that were affiliated with the author of the book, and I was getting like a price for 40 grand US for a week-long facilitated design sprint workshop. Obviously, I couldn't afford that, nonprofit organization. So I parked it and worked with a volunteer, and we did it ourselves. So now fast forward, I have this conference with Salim Ismail talking about high school learning. At the same time, I don't know if I told you this, but I went into one of my son's open houses with his high school, and there's a really passionate teacher there talking about how he's teaching a history lesson. And he was so into it, and was innovative and creative, and he had the kids making things and telling stories. And I thought, wow, I think I want to be a high school teacher. But of course, it wasn't practical where I was in my career to do that. So parked that away and went on with my career. And then a number of other things happened, which I won't go into, but then you and I reconnect around the time, a little bit later, obviously, than that happened. And here you are in high schools teaching. And I was so envious, Lucas, listening to you, but also very happy for you. And then one day you sent me an email saying, hey, I'm growing, I'm looking to hire. Would you mind looking at this position description and let me know what you think? And like, you weren't offering me a position, Lucas, but I read it. And I basically, my response back, I basically applied for the job.
Which was
like,
so
I responded back and I said, here's my comments, very few, but here's all the reasons why I should be your guy.
It was so funny because I asked you because I respect you and I appreciate you. And here's a story where you talked earlier about kind of, we got along, but I'd say it went deeper. There was a shared value that you and I had. And there was one of your former team members, he was transitioning from the Pure Later organization to the TELUS organization. And you and I, as one of those monthly get-togethers, we sat down and we did a cross-organization transition.
Yeah.
Where it was about how can we look out for the best interests of this person?
Yeah.
Who obviously I'm not going to name.
Yeah, but he had hit a glass ceiling working for me at Pure Later. And I knew he was capable of more, but he wasn't going to get an organization. And you happened to call me around that time. This is what, 2010, 2005, I think.
Something like, yeah, it was early. It was a while ago.
2005, 6. And then you called me and we orchestrated this trade or this transfer, I should say.
Yeah, well, and it was, and I think in that kind of a situation, it's one thing to be friends and do these things that we were doing, but there's another layer of shared values when you and I are not doing this because we're going to, put it on LinkedIn and say, look how great we are.
Yeah.
We met because we wanted to set up the smoothest and best transition for the person in question as we could.
Yeah.
So you offered perspective of what he was good at, his path, things to work on, et cetera. And I knew the TELUS environment. So I could think of how I could build on his path, his experience at Purelator. And the very fact that we had that conversation and we did it for the betterment of this person.
Yeah.
To me was you know what, Shaquille and I connect, you and I connect on a level deeper than we were co-leads on a consulting project.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought there was something really, really kind of interesting, really good there. So when I had this job posting and back in September, I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to grow because I'm anticipating more demand, my hypothesis is this is the kind of a person that would be a good fit. So I sent it to you because I respect your perspective. And it was funny when you're like, I'm going to apply. And I was like, that's not what I had in mind. Hold on a second. Okay. And let's ride this horse and see where it goes.
Yeah.
And it took 3 months, right? So the process to kind of go from you're interested to now we're teaching.
Yeah.
That took a while, but it was such a natural road.
Yeah.
And the values was something I realized that maybe I had underestimated the importance of shared values when I put my initial job posting out in September.
Yeah.
So it's just going back to the story of the transition and how I saw you work with your team back at Purelator, how you spoke of people, some of the things you're doing with executive coaching. There was such a respect and appreciation you have for people. And you don't go in trying to tell them what to think. You go in expecting that, you know what, these people are capable and they can do things on their own. Your job is to nurture that. And I went, oh, you know what, that's the kind of mindset that I have. But I really want more of that with the kids. I want the kids to feel that the person instructing them isn't there to say, hey, you're wrong. It's more, no, I believe in you.
Yeah.
Now, how can I help you get to expressing that idea, that solution that you have, but allow you to do it and not do it for you. So I think it's funny that we're having this conversation now because that respect and love you have for people really has come through. And it was one of those things I went, oh, you know what? That is such a part of the secret sauce for an effective instructor with these kids going through the program.
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative.
I don't try not to cut off my guests, but it was really hard to hear all those nice words. But thank you, Lucas. I really appreciate it. And you know me really well. You understand what I'm in this for. But if I connect the dots between what I was experiencing and the quality and the integrity you've put into what you're doing. So that book I read and the facilitator I wanted to hire to do that program for $40,000, you've essentially created a program delivered to students, young people, to teach them how to take any problem and work that problem through a series of steps to develop an innovative solution that's tested, tried, put into the market, gotten user feedback, fine-tuned, redone, and then potentially for the really good ones in a position where if they wanted to take it further, they could.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Lucas, you did hire me and you walked me through this program. You trained me really well. You gave me 2 high school classes to teach, grade 8 classes. I finished one. I'm in the middle of another one now. And as I'm going through this, these young people are blowing my mind. First of all, the program you've created is phenomenal. Just really, really well done for the purposes of teaching like really sophisticated thinking in a simple way to young people. So kudos, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's incredible. And if there's principals and teachers listening here, you should talk to Lucas or talk to me and I'll connect you to Lucas because there's really something special here. So we're doing this in the classrooms and we watch young people go from, I'm not sure I can do this, to we just finished after 8 classes watching these kids do these presentations. And the group I was part of in Kingston, the challenge put in front of the kids is how do you help business owners in the hospitality industry build their business back in the face of a COVID world? That's a pretty big, hairy problem to put in front of grade 8 kids and very real. Absolutely. But they did it. They came up with ideas, solutions, they worked them through. And by the end of it, we had 4 phenomenal really good solutions presentations where they not only achieved the objective, but they described what we would do next post pandemic to expand, to grow. Man, congratulations, Lucas. As just to watch that transformation happen for these young people was really, it sent chills to be part of that. So thank you.
Well, I mean, that was a testament to your teaching, right? So nurturing them, and I think you were very fortunate to have the teacher in question who you co-taught with, and he's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think that was just like kind of you plus the teacher.
Let's give him some props because I'm sure he would mind. Keith Alcott from Limestone District School Board in Kingston. Fantastic. Amazing teacher, great partner, kids interest for their future front and center. He would play rock and roll music as the class was starting, like totally engaged these young people. And I was very fortunate to have him as the teacher that I partnered with.
And you talk about these kids and the experience and the presentations. That's kind of a 4-part equation. There's kind of you, there's Keith, there's the students, and then the board level, Jason Quenville was the one who said, you know what, I want to try this. So again, it's educators who see the bigger picture, who have the students in mind. Yeah. Now, I'll say one thing, just in case anyone's listening is thinking, well, what special breed of children is this? Are these unicorns? You had one group that they were fighting with each other, right? Like they were grade 8s and they were like, what is wrong with my team members? So,
well, yeah, that was a great story because the kids were basically, they were struggling to make progress. And this was like 6 weeks in or six classes in. And the teacher came into the group and saying, what's going on here? Like, how come you guys aren't really able to get this going? And one of the kids said, Mr. A, that's what they called Mr. A, you've put us together. We're all different. We all have different interests. We all have different personalities. And he came up with some kind of analogy. I can't remember, something like putting apples and oranges and grapefruits all together and expecting them to be the same. This is not going to work. There's no way. And he had so much conviction it's not going to work. So he was coming at this from a perspective is that diversity is not a good thing. And we had a bit of a conversation with them and let them air their grievances and actually planted a couple of ideas. What if he did this? What if he did that? And then I backed off and watched what happened. And I stepped out of the room, virtual room, went to another group, and then we saw their final presentation. Why don't you tell us what happened in that final presentation with that particular group?
It was just the cohesion, the thinking was definitely there. And it was interesting, one point, I think you asked them a question and you would, for the person who didn't know that they were disagreeing or had disagreed at one point, it was not clear. There was, I wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
The presentation was really well, it was a really good presentation. The idea was solid. The transitions were very smooth. But even when you asked a question that acknowledged their previous conflict, I think there was such a life lesson in that for them that they learned something that was beyond coming up with a solution to a problem, helping people in the hospitality and tourism sector.
Yeah.
I think they got a life lesson in how to leverage diversity to improve a group situation, which is like, what team wouldn't want that?
Yeah. What they ended up doing, they couldn't agree on doing a commercial because nobody wanted to record themselves doing a commercial. So then they decided to, okay, well, we can't do a commercial, but we're all comfortable presenting live. So they created a play, a radio play, where each of them played different characters. They played their personality and they played different characters, from the young person that wanted to go to a restaurant but couldn't because of COVID, to his friend who wanted to do something different, to all the people that worked in the restaurant, to the business owner. And they created this 3-act play.
Yeah.
And in 10 minutes, they walked us through the situation and their solution. It was so inspiring to watch these kids go through that journey and turn what they thought was a disadvantage, their diversity, into a differentiating advantage for themselves. It was mind-blowing.
Well, and for me, I've worked with, even during pandemic, I've worked with about 1,500 students, all online. And so I've kind of got a gist of, enough data points to have an opinion. And that was the first time I'd ever seen students go through that, create a play the way that these guys did.
Yeah.
And it was inspiring, and it did stand out, and it became even more inspiring because the journey they took wasn't one that was perfectly smooth. They had to really get nitty gritty, and they still came up with this idea that was unique, was effective, was inspirational.
Yeah.
But knowing the backstory is one of those, oh man, like it feels good. You asked me earlier, does it feel good to know about, be part of Lynn's story? Yeah. You're part of this group's story. And they don't have a business. They're 13, 14 years old, but to have been part of that journey for them to learn the value of diversity and how to figure themselves out, and then to come out of it with a product, a presentation that was that much different and that much more effective than
Yeah. Yeah.
like, that's cool, right? That's the stuff
Yeah.
that,
It's cool. And they did it all virtually.
yep.
Right. And if they were in a live classroom, look, I know there's lots of challenges and problems with online learning, but if they were in a live school environment, they likely would not have kind of hung out together because
Right.
they were so different. These kids were so different. They would have been in different social circles in the school. But because they were thrown into this virtual environment and they were randomly put into these groups, they had no choice but to work through it. And so they couldn't give up. They couldn't walk away and go to their own friends. They had to
Exactly.
work with this group. And so one of those positives that came out of this experience, I really hope it does, they live that lesson going forward in the future. Lucas, let's pause for a second here and just, I'm going to ask you to fast forward a little bit in life. Let's say your business that's been growing. You don't think of it as a business, but it is a business because there's obviously you are offering a service and you're giving value and getting value back for it. But let's say that you are successful and you have this program rolled out across the country, all over the place. What does the future look like for young people graduating high school, having had an experience like the Y2 experience in their education?
I think a couple of things. I think the landscape, the working landscape that these students are going to wander into, and obviously the crystal ball I have is foggy for the most part. But if I were to make a bet, the job market that'll be waiting for them in 2, 3, 5 years is, and organizations like the World Economic Forum have gone off and said stuff like along these lines, that a lot of the jobs that will exist in 5 years have not been created today. We will be looking at more of a gig economy, freelance, project-based economy. And so there will be the need for people who want to be effective in that environment to be problem solvers, to be good communicators, to be able to be good team members with teams of very different shapes, sizes, locations, and so forth. So what I am hoping that students who've gone through a Y2 experience is that they've had a chance to practice those muscles. They've activated them, they've tried it. It's not foreign, it's not scary to them. So when the students that you taught at Limestone DSB, when they pop out in whatever number of years and they find themselves in a freelance, in a virtual team, working on a project, even if they don't do this again, this kind of experience again, which I hope they do, whether it be Y2 or someone else, but if they go through it, they can go, you know what? Yeah, I remember this. I remember what it's like to disagree with people on a team because we're so different. And I know what it's like to work entirely virtually. And this is what I learned when I was going through PBL. And I can apply that lesson and become an effective employee, team member, contributor. So I do think there's that, but there's something even more important to me is that how many of those kids in your classroom, in any of the classrooms I've taught, how many kids were in there saying, no, I can't do this. I'm looking around, I'm going, all these other people virtually, I see their icons. They can do it. I think they go, this person, Marcus is so charismatic and Emma is really articulate. I can't do it. And how many of those kids walk out of that experience going, hey, I did it.
Yeah.
And I taught a class of grade 11s and 12s last week.
Yeah.
And the situation was a little different where at community partners, so local business owner came and shared his challenges and the students applied design thinking to go through and come up with a solution. And the solutions were largely really applicable, but things that the business owner hadn't thought about. So he said,
right,
like, I hadn't thought about it. How do I do this? You're telling me this is a good solution, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But how do I do this? And so one kid was like, all right, well, here's how you do it. And she went on, took a chance and she laid it out. And he kind of went, oh my God, like that's your stuff. And she stopped and she's like, sounds like you need a social media manager. And I was like, she's gonna do it. She's gonna do it. And she essentially was like, not can I have a job, but she identified a need and offered and demonstrated she knew what she was doing, that he was actually thinking about it. But it was another example where afterwards, we're joking about it.
Yeah.
With the teacher, the students, and me. And the student was like, I didn't think I could do that. But
yeah,
my God, I did. And I went, that's what I want. I want students to walk out of these experiences, hopefully going, you know what? There was a thing I didn't think I could do. Public speaking, solve a problem, talk to a business owner, work in a team. I'm the imposter syndrome, all of that. I'm hoping that students will walk out going, hey, I did do that.
Yeah.
It's the short-term confidence boost.
Yeah.
And one that cannot be taken away. It's the I know I did it. It doesn't matter that I got praise or didn't get praise.
Yeah.
It's not external. It's the internal, I feel good that I can do this.
Yeah.
And becomes a championship moment. The next time they doubt, then hopefully they can reach back into that moment.
Love it.
You know what? I can do it. So that's kind of the short-term and the longer-term views of what I'm hoping to.
Absolutely. Lucas, you're basically rewiring their brains right? From this belief that they can't do something, this whole fight or flight mechanism. When they come across a challenge, they're afraid of the challenge or they want to run away from the challenge. The process is about reprogramming that. And I watched it happen with young people. So there's that kind of confidence boosting, facing the future. Some of the practical skills that I asked the kids at the end, what have you taken from this? They'll say things, I've learned how to take a problem and break it down. I've learned how to get feedback without feeling defensive, how to take criticism without it hurting my feelings and actually doing something with that feedback. I've learned how to collaborate with a team and recognize it's not always about just me talking about my ideas. It's about listening to others and helping them develop their ideas. And I'm thinking, wow, like I've worked with adults that struggle with these things. We all have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now there are these young people that are going into the world having experienced this. It's changing the game for young people. So I wish you nothing but success, and not just because I want to continue to teach high school kids with you, but I really do, for the goodness of our world, our society, for young people. I really do. I said this to the kids at the end of the last class, that I feel so confident about the future, the challenges that we're all facing, knowing there's young people like that coming into the world that have these skills to solve these problems and the confidence they can do it. So thank you for doing that. And in our last couple of minutes here, I just wanted to ask you, based on everything you've seen and learned, what do you know now that you didn't know, let's say 5 years ago? What do you know for sure now that you didn't know 5 years ago?
I think it's a reflection that I'm sharing in case anyone who's listening needs to hear this. So I grew up in an environment where the expectation was big corporate. So being of this color and ethnicity and race, and the big joke was growing up, there were only four legitimate occupations. Big business, engineering, medicine, and law. And these were prescribed fields, and I was encouraged to go into law, and that would not have worked out well for me. But 5 years ago, I think the idea of taking something that I was very passionate about, and not passionate because I was trying to be right, but passionate because there was a legit problem, and the people who were affected, students, they didn't necessarily have a lot of options available to them. And to be more specific for me, I'm very aware that there are options for students who may have the access to the financial or transportation resources to go do expensive things. And there are fantastic programs out there, and I take nothing away from them. But not every child has access to $6,000 and a chauffeur, parent, person to drive them 40 minutes to go to a program. So for me to think, okay, well, what about the kids who can't do that? How can we how can we help them? And I think over the 5 years, I've learned that being very specific about the problem, and if it's a legit problem, good things will happen. Focusing on a legit problem, focusing on helping somebody who has a very true need, and offering to them in a way that suits their need. If you kind of align those three things together, then definitely there's opportunity, along with hard work, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that for me, going back, if I told myself 5 years ago, you're going to be in this position with Y2, that is how you're having impacts, you're working with old friends, and you're helping kids find their confidence. I don't think I would have believed it, because I couldn't fathom, you couldn't picture it. Whereas today, the lesson has been, I've been so true to the North Star of the child who doesn't have these opportunities, but really would benefit from the opportunities, and have the solution meet their needs and the teacher's needs. Has really been good for me to realize that these kinds of changes can be done.
So you've leveraged the navigation of disruption in your own career, going back a few years, to now being in a position where you're equipping young people to have confidence to navigate disruption as it continues to happen in their lives going forward. So amazing work. Where can people find out more about Y2 and about you? Where should they go?
Yeah, so the Y2 website is Y2, so the letter Y, number 2, labs, labs.co. That's our website. Our Twitter handle is the same thing as our Instagram handle. But if you reach out through the website, the emails come to me. I'm happy to keep chatting. And if anyone is curious about whether it be some of the stuff that we've been doing with kids, or some of the backstory of leading up to it, or lessons learned, I'm happy to have that conversation. And that's how to find me. One thing I will kind of throw back at you, Shaquille, is thank you again for being part of this journey. You've had a tremendous impact on already the one class. Bigger than that, I really appreciate kind of what you're trying to do with this podcast, with working with the kids. The commonality has been your desire to help people be the best versions of themselves. And I really appreciate being part of your story and working with you again. So thank you for this opportunity to share my story and have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Lucas. It's been a great partnership, and I look forward to many more years to come. Thanks for your time. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
You know, Lucas and I have been talking weekly for the last couple of months, but in this conversation, I picked up so much more than I ever knew about him. Here's some takeaways from the conversation. When you want to self-disrupt or change things up, you don't always have to know what you're going to do next. You don't always have to have clarity on your next step. But what you do have to do is be open to self-reflect, take risks, experiment, remember childhood experiences, notice what boosts your energy, and find a problem that needs solving. Find a pain point that a specific person or group is experiencing, and think about how to bring all that you have, all your experiences, to solve for that problem. There's probably a pretty good clue there as to what you can do next. The second thing is, while we work on ourselves, achieving what we want for ourselves in our own lives, it's really important at the same time to think about how we can impact the next generation, each and every one of us. It's like the circle of life. The young people in schools right now have so much potential. They are brilliant. They are self-aware. They know what the problems are in the world. We are going to be okay as a society as long as we continue to invest in the capability of these young people. The third thing was, when looking for a partner, an organization to work for or volunteer for, colleagues to hire, dig deep to discover if you have shared values. Those are much more important than skill set, strategy, all of the typical things you would look at, money, title. Do you share values with the organization or people that you're going to work with? Great conversation for me. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, or share it. I want to say thank you to one of my favorite bands, Late Night Conversations, for sharing their song Chaos with me and letting me use it in this episode. You can learn more about them on Instagram at LNC Connected. And here's more of their song Chaos to take you out.
Far behind my eyes, mediation, suffocation, it'll break me. Information in disguise. But when your eyes finally found mine, you were there, but I'm defined by the chaos in my mind. I believe what I perceive is a weave tearing at the seams, and I wonder what's behind. And my ears are bleeding, and the reason isn't the logic of the season, taking the pleasing from my soul and leaving me to die. And I feel the lacing, LNC like racing, unstationary animation taking me from the purpose of my life.